Welcome to On the Way, a podcast about life. But not just any life, it's about life with Jesus. Why do people follow Jesus, and how do they get started? And what difference does following Jesus make in their lives? Before Christians had a name, they were known as people of the way, people who followed Jesus' teachings. People have been on the way for nearly 2,000 years now. During the podcast, we explore the ways that people become followers of Jesus and why, and what difference following Jesus makes in their lives. On the Way is produced by the Baptist Standard, a donor-supported provider of news, opinion, and resources for living like Jesus. I'm Eric Black, editor of the Baptist Standard. I'm glad you're with us today. We're here with Rhoda Gonzales, and she is the advertising production manager for Neiman Marcus Group. Rhoda, thank you so much for joining us on the On the Way podcast.
Of course. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. Well, as you and I have talked a little bit about, the podcast focuses on two main questions. The first question is, how did you become a follower of Christ? And the second question is, so what difference does following Christ make in your life? How does being a follower of Christ inform your decisions and influence your business decisions and those kinds of things? So, Rhoda, tell us, how did you become a follower of Christ?
When I was a young girl, I grew up in a Christian home. My dad was a pastor, and as a matter of fact, I have a long lineage of Christian family, which is very unusual for a Hispanic family. My grandfather was a pastor, and his father was a pastor. So my dad was a pastor for 47 years, and I grew up in a Christian home. But it wasn't until I was 16 that I went to a youth camp where I really felt like the Lord was calling me into Christian service, or to become a Christian, number one. And I remember making that decision at a youth camp, and I told the Lord, use me however you will. I don't know what you're going to do, but use me. And it was a wonderful decision. And even as a young girl, I understood what that meant for my life. And now I've served the Lord all my life. Of course, I've had my peaks and valleys, as most people do. But
That's
I have
right,
served
yeah.
the Lord in different areas and ministries. And how my following Jesus Christ influences my decisions every day. Well, I live with a biblical worldview in every area, and in my my secular world, or in my tent making job, which I like to consider it.
Okay.
I use all the principles that I learned out of Proverbs, and the scriptures keep me from using maybe some language or from attitudes that maybe would be very easy to use in my line of work, because my line of work is very, very much secular and liberal. But the Lord has given me an opportunity through what I've learned from the scriptures to use that as a ministry opportunity to speak to people about the Lord, pray with people, and also to make right decisions based on my business acumen.
And that's been at work?
Yes, in my work, definitely.
Okay.
Yes, I've been in my business for over 30 years, and in different areas, of course, but in the advertising world, it tends to be very, very fast-paced, very stressful, lots of human interaction, and a lot of opportunity for clashes, for decision-making, and for attitudes. But it's been a wonderful opportunity to be in on a career that would give me great opportunity to shine for Christ. Even if I don't say anything, it's just more about my presence. And a lot of people come to me and ask me questions about that. And they say, well, I understand that you're a Christian. Can you pray for me? Or think about me when you do this, or think about me when you go here. And I think to myself, this is a great chance to integrate my faith with people who otherwise would not have heard about Jesus or the gospel.
Are people surprised when you tell them that you are the way you are because you're a Christian?
Sometimes they are, because they don't understand, number one, what being a Christian really means. To them, it's more of religious experience. And they say, oh, you're religious, right? And I say, well, no, not really. I said, I usually have to say, I have a relationship with Jesus Christ, and He influences everything that I do. And that kind of opens the door to either more questions or a definite slam and say, okay, great, that's great for you, but not for me.
Yeah, I guess it goes one way or the other. There's not a whole lot of middle ground.
That is right.
Yeah. So the way that you've described marketing and advertising, it sounds really competitive, sort of that proverbial dog-eat-dog world. Is that pretty accurate?
That is accurate. As a matter of fact, when I first started my career many years ago, I didn't have any idea that advertising would be so competitive and dog eat dog. As a matter of fact, if you're not on top of the game all the time, learning new software, learning the tricks of the trade, if you will, then there would be a greater opportunity to be passed up and to allow for somebody else
Okay.
to come into your place.
So you really have to stay on top of your game.
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In not only technology, but also in selling practice. That's why I say it's a really stressful arena, but a great opportunity to show my faith in patience and in lots of diplomatic discussions. And I've really enjoyed it. It's been a really great career.
You mentioned a little bit ago the Proverbs that you learned. I'm assuming those are Proverbs that you learned when you were young, that they were taught to you by your parents, your grandparents, your church, Proverbs that you had read on your own in Scripture. What were some of the Proverbs, or what are some of the Proverbs that inform how you carry yourself at work?
Well, so many. Every day when we were raising our boys, we would have breakfast together and we would sit down at the table, and depending on the day of the month, we would choose that chapter to read. For instance, today is the 19th, and we would read Proverbs 19. Well, one of my favorite ones is in Proverbs 11 that says, a soft answer will turn away wrath. And that's one of my absolute favorite ones that I get to use every single day. Another one
I
is
was going to say, I bet that one comes in handy a lot.
every day. I'm
Yeah.
telling you, every day. And then the other one that says, trust in the Lord, and do not follow your own ways, but it is the Lord that guides the heart. And it also talks, another one of my favorites that I love is, he who trusts the Lord he will write it on the tablet of their heart. And those things are just those Proverbs are very precious to me. And also because of, we had an opportunity as young parents to teach them to our boys, and they continue in that practice now.
We're going to take a sponsor break, and we'll be right back.
Since 1952, South Texas Children's Home Ministries has focused on healing hearts and sharing hope. Their 9 ministries focus on helping hurting children and families, all regardless of an individual's ability to pay. To find out more, visit www.stchm.org.
How do you... I'm still curious, because the way that you describe the work that you do and the way these Proverbs inform how you go about that work, I would imagine that there are some Christians who would look at sort of the standard expectations of how a Christian carries themselves in the world, or ought to carry themselves in the world, and then beside that, look at a description of marketing and advertising, like you've described it. How do you put those two together?
Well, when you can see the practical applications of the book of Proverbs and how it helps to guide our lives, it's incredible to apply them. For instance, another one of my favorites is in chapter 3, where it says, my son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you prosperity. And I remember applying that in my life, and I remember saying, Lord, if I follow you, I need you to take care of me. And I'm going to tell you, brother, the Lord has taken care of us over many layoffs, over the shifts of the economics in our business. And it's been beautiful to see how the Lord has taken care of me all through these years.
So you've been in that industry, but you haven't been at Neiman Marcus for 30 years.
I've been at Neiman Marcus for 23 years.
Okay.
And I've been in the advertising industry for 30.
Yes. Okay. So you've been where you are for quite a while.
I've been in the advertising business for a very long time and in our
Yeah.
department, and it's been really incredible to see the different changes over the years. Another thing, if you don't mind, I was just thinking about another proverb that's really
Yeah.
important to me is in chapter 10 of Proverbs, where it says, "The wise in heart accept commands, but a chattering fool comes to ruin."
Mm.
And that one is one of my favorites because it talks about a man, or in this case, myself, a woman, who listens to counsel, who listens to teaching, and doesn't talk so much. Because what I see now are young people that come into my office and are looking for jobs. They talk so much but say so little.
Mm.
And it's really been wonderful to be able to say just what was necessary, and that way I didn't have to elaborate so much, but I was very choice. Not all the time, of course, but in the heat of the moment, the Lord gave me the opportunity to speak just those precise words that I needed, and then just to be quiet. And I've seen that the Lord has protected me because of that, where I saw other of my coworkers, He did not.
Mm. Yeah, I can imagine having some exchanges with people at work, and there has to be times, I would imagine, when there are some competing interests, or maybe it's someone who's trying to be promoted, or something like that, and or they're trying to get ahead in business. If it's a dog eat dog world, you're always trying to do that, and here you are, and you have these proverbs just embedded in you. They're part of the fabric of who you are. The way that you've shared various proverbs with us, you've known these for not just 30 years, but going back to your childhood. They're embedded in you, and so you're in these exchanges. And I would imagine that there have got to be times when your coworkers or clients or whoever it is you're working with, they've got to wonder, what in the world is wrong with you?
Well, many of them thought that I was very different and strange, and they never
Mm.
hesitated to say so. Because a lot of them, let's just put it for an example, I would get invited to client dinners or celebrations that were either during work or after work. And I always made it my practice never be alone with a man by
Mm-hmm.
myself. And that is one thing that my husband and I made an agreement years ago when I told him about my work. I said a lot of times I'll have to spend moments or meetings with men, and you just need to understand that one of my policies is I am never going to be alone with a man anywhere. And
Mm.
that has helped a lot. And there's many people that don't understand that,
Yeah.
just don't understand why you can't go out to have lunch with Eric Black. Why can't you just go by yourself? And I have to explain to them because I respect my husband and I respect our relationship, our marriage, and our reputation. And sometimes it was not always easy. I'm just going to be honest. It wasn't easy, but I had to keep that policy. And there was a lot of people that thought that was very strange, but I had to keep it. And to this day, the Lord has protected us and kept us from any kind of ill words or gossip, and that's a big deal whenever you're in our kind of business. Another thing I want to share, another proverb before I forget, is in Proverbs 16 and
Okay.
24. It says,
Yeah.
"Pleasant words are a honeycomb, sweet to the
Mm.
soul and healing to the bones." And I remember that was really important to me because when you choose your words carefully, they sound like life instead of critical, because there's a lot of opportunity for criticism in our business, again, because of competition. And let's say, for instance, I would present an idea for a campaign, and some person would criticize it or maybe cut it apart. And
Mm.
I just had to remember pleasant words are like honeycomb, and you just have to hold back because in the natural, you want to defend yourself. But over the years, the Lord has just shown me just to be kind and to wait and give my words in a more appropriate fashion. And it's kind of funny. I have the nickname, they call me the diplomat, and
Okay.
it's really funny. But I receive it in the name of Jesus. I'm
Mm.
grateful because whenever there's a mishap or misunderstanding in the office, I like to go in and say, okay, let's talk about this. Let's break it down. Let's see what really happened. And that's where those pleasant words are super, super critical.
I still, I picture the workplace where you are, and some of the things that you encounter. You said that when you bring in a proposal or a project to someone, I'm also thinking that there's got to be a qualitative difference because of who you are in Christ between what you present and what someone else presents in order to sell a product.
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, there are some people that bring presentations that can come across as cutting corners. Okay,
Mm,
cutting
okay.
corners and cheating in certain areas, and think that they can make up the difference at the end. And I always encourage my team members, we need to be upfront with the cost. We need to be upfront with all the things that are going to be presented. We can't hide anything, because if we do, it will come out. It will come out at
Eventually.
the end.
Hmm.
And that is a principle in the New Testament, that nothing that will be hidden will not be proclaimed from the housetops. And I remember when Jesus was sharing that with the disciples, that nothing should be hidden. And I remember one distinct time that there was a campaign I was presenting, and one of my coworkers said, "Oh, why are you going to use that particular that particular item?" And I said, "Because it's a high quality, and that's what's expected of us." And they said, "Well, why don't you give this other one that's lesser quality, and you can make a little extra money in another area?"
Yeah, none will be the wiser, right?
Yes. And I
Yeah.
said, "Because I'll know, because
Mm.
I'll know, and because it will be found out." And,
Hmm.
and I'll never forget that person. We never agreed on that particular campaign, but I did get the campaign, by the way.
Okay.
And they paid the money, and they observed the quality, and I had to sell it. I sold it on that, and it was really incredible. I'll never forget that campaign. Another situation that I'd like to share with you, where I could share my faith in Christ, or actually just live for the Lord. And please
Mm.
understand, Eric, I say this humbly, because if it wasn't for the Lord, let me tell you, I don't know how I would be in this business at all, because it is very, very cutthroat, and it is very competitive. But one of the things that it's very easy to fall into the trap of negativity,
Mm.
because there's a lot of no's in our business. There's a lot of criticism in our business, where people are we present an idea and it's cut down, and you can't go home until you present the right one, and you've got 3 hours, and I need to see some results. And in those tight time frames, it's very easy to become negative. And another one of my favorite proverbs that I personally have to keep in mind, it is in Proverbs, where it says, "A cheerful heart is good medicine,
That's
but a
right.
crushed spirit dries up the bones." And when I can remember and have an uplifted spirit, it's a lot easier to deal with those issues, instead of getting sucked into that negative attitude. Because it's real easy. It's real easy, especially like times that we're living in today, where
Mm.
so many people are losing their jobs. So many
Hmm.
people are not functioning professionally, and they do lose their jobs, because a lot of them lose it because of their negativity. And I encourage you, especially young people, just to be kind, and to be thinking that it's about being grateful first, and then once you pay your dues, then you can climb up the ladder, and you're not entitled to that position. But if you can pay your dues and do it with a cheerful heart, or with a good attitude, then people will notice that, and you'll go higher faster.
Mm. To hear you talk, it sounds like it. Well, if I was someone listening, I might think that it's easy for you to be that kind of person in the moment, and maybe you've had a lot of opportunity to practice that, and it's a little bit easier now than it used to be. Has it always been easy to bring these proverbs to mind?
No, it hasn't. It
Mm.
hasn't, because especially when I was starting in the career, I had to pay my dues too, and I had to stay until 2 and 3 in the morning to
Mm.
work on a J.C. Penney campaign, or to work on some newspaper ads, and it was very difficult. But I will tell you that over the years, the more practice into that, allowing those proverbs to come back into my mind and my heart, it really made it a lot easier. And as a matter of fact, Eric, I keep scriptures, critical scriptures, in my office just to
Ah,
remind me. Please remind me, Lord, help me keep my words in check. Help my attitude be right for you. Because remember, sometimes I'm the only person that they're going to ever come in contact with as a believer. And when they ask me questions, I want to be able to answer with the correct biblical perspective. Another reason is because another one of my favorite proverbs is, it says, "A good name is more desirable than riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold."
mm-hmm.
And I would much rather be known for telling the truth and being straight up and being a good influence and having a positive attitude than climbing up the ladder, stepping on people to make the big salary. So
Because that's how
really
you'll be known. Once you
correct.
get there and you get that big salary, you've got the, the corner office, whatever it is. That's how you're going to be known. You're going to be
That's
known
right.
as the person who stepped over everybody else to get there.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And I wasn't in a position. I didn't want to have that tagged on me. So I just really would rather have a good reputation and be trustworthy, because it's great to be able to be in the position where people can trust you to fulfill difficult tasks.
Hmm.
And I love that. I love to be able to unravel the gnarly projects that nobody wants. Those are the ones that I like to tackle.
We're going to take a 60-second sponsor break, and we'll be right back. High Ground Advisors has a 90-year history of providing investment management and planned giving solutions to churches, faith-based organizations, and charitably minded individuals dedicated to transforming lives. High Ground is trusted by over 450 nonprofit clients, and we're one of them. High Ground has partnered with Baptist Standard for over 70 years by offering a comprehensive charitable giving and investment solutions model, which includes asset management, planned giving education and development, account support services, real estate and minerals management, and expert legal consultation. High Ground and the Baptist Standard share similar values, such as serving those who are called and dedicated to transforming lives and being a trusted caretaker of legacies. They also value good stewardship, helping those who desire to be good stewards of their financial resources to find creative giving solutions to fulfill that calling. They know what they do to protect, strengthen, and grow our mission is ultimately in service to the gospel. To learn more about how High Ground Advisors can partner with you or your organization, visit their website at highgroundadvisors.org. When you got into the industry, you said a while ago that you learned that marketing and advertising was a lot tougher than you thought it was going to be. Was there someone in the industry that sort of took you under their wing and was a positive influence for you, or did you sort of have to figure that out on your own?
A little bit of both,
Okay.
because my public relations and advertising prof at Baylor University was Dr. Adrian Vaughn, and he has already gone to be with the Lord at this time. But he was a great influence in my life that encouraged me to try things that nobody else has done. And see, back then when I was studying advertising, number one, there wasn't a lot of women in our industry. Number
Hmm.
two, there wasn't a lot of Hispanic women. And
Aha.
number
Okay.
three, there wasn't a lot of women who wanted to write as well as design. It was just a very competitive, male dominated career. If you can think about, I know this is a bad example, but there was a television show way back when I was growing up. It was called Bewitched, and
Yes.
and her husband's boss was named Larry Tate, if
Hmm.
you remember him. And
Yeah,
I
I do.
remember him going into advertising meetings. And I remember as a little girl watching that, and I was wondering what that was. And then as I went to college, I had a Larry Tate in my life, and that was Dr. Adrian Vaughn. And he was wonderful, and he taught me a lot about perseverance and being determined and never giving up and having scruples. And that was super, super important. And then I had another person who was in my life who was very, very helpful. His name was Donald Proust. He was my boss for about 10 years. And he taught me a lot about our business. He taught me a lot about staying straight. And he also taught me sometimes it's good to ask for forgiveness rather than permission.
Ah.
And sometimes in our business, you just have to make the right decision because the clients, they don't know which direction to take. And
Mm.
that's why our integrity is so critical because you're managing these projects and managing a lot of money. And that's why it had to be super important for us to have character and integrity.
Yeah, it's because what you present and what a client ends up purchasing, that in a way becomes the public face of that company.
That's correct. That is correct.
Yeah. And when they don't know which direction to go, and you could lead them in a direction that is good for your portfolio but may not necessarily be good for anything else. It might be good for their business, but who knows what else. That is a moment where you're really faced with a character choice.
Absolutely. I can remember a couple of times when I had to go and fight on behalf of the client because of money, of course.
Mm.
Money is such a big issue in our business that I remember standing many times before, um, uh, the designers and the creative directors and saying, we have to present this. We have to show it this way. Because if we don't, then we're going to compromise the integrity of this brand. And,
Mm.
and even though it was an internal brand, it was the highest brand that we represented and they just again wanted to cut corners. But sometimes you just have to make decisions to help the client because they don't know. They trust us to have that kind of integrity, but yet savvy. You have to have business savvy to know what their brand is going to look like in the next 5 years, 10 years, and beyond. And that's why we have to make those recommendations. And some people don't always want to agree, but I've been very blessed that a lot of the clients that I made a suggestion, they usually went with them.
As I hear you talk about that, there's three characteristics or qualities that I think you've got to possess. You talked earlier about things are changing, and you've got to have. If you present something and the client says, "No, I don't like that. I need something in 3 hours," and there's sort of this negative feedback coming and this competition. One, you got to have your wits about you,
Yes.
and then just now you said a certain savvy, and I've got to think you've got to have some moxie. Would that
Absolutely.
be accurate?
Yes, and back in the day, we used to call it grit.
Yes.
And
Uh
when
huh.
I remember one time I was working for an ad agency before I went to Neiman's, and I had the most difficult client. Oh my goodness. He owned a travel agency and it was a big, huge international travel agency. And I remember many times presenting to this man our campaigns. And I remember him folding his arms. And many times I would go to him and say, well, this is what we'd like to do for your, XYZ brochure or whatever. And he'd say, I don't like that. I don't think that's a good choice. And I remember having to just be very gentle and saying, well, I would like to recommend that you go this way because this is a good idea for you. Well, what does it cost? And it was always about cost. But once
Mm-hmm.
you explain to the client, these are the different ways you can benefit from this. I would say 9 times out of 10, my clients would usually either accept the idea or with some modifications. But there's some people though that would cower back and say, "Well, okay, if that's not what you want." But if you believe in your product and if you believe in your idea, then you've got to sell it to the client because they don't know any better. That's why
Mm.
they're hiring you so that you can be the expert for them.
So how did you learn that?
I'm telling you, School of Hard Knocks.
Ah.
Um, the School of Hard Knocks. There, my boss at that agency, his name was Larry Brantley. He was a very smart individual, wonderful man, who taught me how to approach clients with a very kind attitude. He said, "You present the plate, you sit down, and you feed it to them, basically." And he said, "You've got to be patient because sometimes it takes them a little time for them to understand what we're trying to sell because really we were selling ourselves. We were
Mm.
selling ourselves and our creativity and our ability to put together a campaign that these people needed."
See,
And it
now
was
you're getting personal. You said you're selling yourselves, and what you're admitting there is that, I mean, you've put your heart and soul into this thing, and
correct.
when somebody doesn't understand it, they don't appreciate it, they don't like it, it's not just a matter of criticism. I mean, your soul's out there in front of them.
That's correct. And I
Mm.
remember there was some times when I literally had to cancel some of the pieces because we had to address them, and they just wouldn't give in, and they wouldn't give in. So finally, we would have to redesign that. But I wouldn't ever redesign a whole campaign. It would always be just some adjustments because remember, the client depends on us to tell them what is best for their brand.
Mm.
And that's how we had to sell it. But there was sometimes that I have to give in, or our team had to give in. Either the art director or the designer didn't agree with some of the direction that the client was going, and that was my job as the project manager or as the manager of of that particular campaign to sell the client on the design. Because quite honestly, Mr. Eric, a lot of those designers didn't really communicate well, and so it
Mm.
was very important for me to kind of intervene.
They were maybe over specialized. They were really good at design, but not so much at the communication piece.
Yes. Communication was sometimes a challenge, and is because there are different skill sets,
Yeah.
because
Yep.
design is a very specific skill set, and what I do is different too. So it's
Is
been
that still the case in marketing and advertising, that you have these specializations, or are people beginning to become more cross-trained?
they're becoming more and more cross trained. As a matter of fact, some of the finer um, design elements that I started in the business with, people are not doing those as much. As a matter of fact, they're becoming more technical, and the art is becoming much more generic, more watered down,
Hmm.
to where it becomes more online appropriate. And
Yes.
they're trying to cross platform between online, print, and every other communication piece, and keeping it the same.
Yeah, because you have
And
to,
it's
the color
unfortunate.
scheme has to work all the way
Correct.
across,
Yes, it
for
does.
example. Yeah.
And of course, if you've been in our business at all, you would know that print is very different than online. Some
Yeah,
of the
very different.
colors, even on online, is are very distinctly different than the print piece, and it's just a totally different direction. But that's where we're heading, to where it's a little bit more of a generic or a baseline approach rather than a specialty approach.
As you talk about that, and I didn't mean for it to be a leading question, but as soon as you started answering it, I thought, it seems like in our churches too, that there's sort of a move almost by necessity to more cross training in the way that ministers need to lead their churches. And uh, I just, anyway, that's something that crossed my mind. And maybe I think about that because I was a pastor in a place where I had to be good at more than one thing, or maybe not necessarily good, but but willing to do
Good.
more than one thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, that is definitely a trend at this time. Pastors and people in the ministry are having to cross train in many areas, and they need to specialize in many areas. And I would recommend, just because of our business, that pastors would really become more proficient with the internet, and how they can be more tech savvy and use live streaming on Facebook, and how they can use the social media to advertise their church. Excuse me, I didn't mean to say advertise, to promote their church, and to encourage other people to use those platforms as well. Sometimes churches are afraid of it. They're afraid of social media. They're afraid of taking those risks. But it's important, and I believe that the pastors today need to be very sharp with their business practice. As a matter of fact, it'd be really awesome if they had their undergraduate in business or in
Mm.
marketing, because that is a huge piece in the church today.
That's a pretty timely word too, considering that so many churches just immediately shifted online.
Yes, that is
And
correct.
there were pastors who were talking about, well, maybe someday, and then all of a sudden, I mean, just wham, it's all online.
It's really incredible because we live in some very precarious times now, Dr. Eric,
Mm-hmm.
in the times that you cannot anticipate what's going to happen in the future. You cannot anticipate what the trends are going to be, what people are going to prefer, and the preferences of people is very, very persnickety. And pardon me for using that word, but people are very
I like it. I like it.
they are just very, very. One day they prefer one thing, and the next day, they change their mind completely
Hmm.
because people are very qualitative. They like one thing for a little bit, and then something, a twirly shiny thing gets their attention, and immediately they're moved over to the other side. And that can be for churches as well.
Hmm.
And that's why pastors need to really have that business acumen. They need to really understand marketing and promotion so that they can get their name out there. They can really do promotion so that they can encourage people, especially the lost, to come to their church, because people that are in the general public are not going to go to a church that does not have that technical understanding for them to come. Because think about it, everybody uses their phone for communications. They use email, texting, and everything. And if a pastor is not um, up to date with what's going on in the social media realm or in the technology realm, he's going to be left behind. He and his staff. And our people now, they want short, quick, concise messages through text, through Facebook, through Instagram, whatever that means for them. And I'm telling you now, our business is changing so rapidly
Hmm.
that we can barely keep up ourselves. I'm talking about advertising, because we're trying to run and keep up with the technical advances that are changing every single day. And based on what you said earlier, our church had to get back online quickly. And it was really incredible that our pastor said in January, he said, I want our church to be 100% ready to be Facebook Live ready at any moment. And so immediately our leadership started moving because they're so amazing. They follow pastor's vision. We never knew that in March that we would need that type of technology because of
That's
all
right.
this concern with COVID.
That's
It's really
right.
incredible how the Lord puts that in our hearts.
Yes. Well, as we come to a close, can you give us one more proverb?
I would love to.
All right.
One of my favorite ones, and this is going to be very funny, but this is one that my dad really focused on when I was a young girl, and it is, the woman folly is loud. She is undisciplined and without knowledge. It's going to make you laugh. But he would say, don't be loud. He said, don't be ridiculous. Don't be acting foolish. And because when you talk too much and when you're loud, that shows your lack of knowledge. And
Hmm.
I'll never forget that. And it's just interesting that like I said earlier in the program, so many people talk so much but say so little. And I want to encourage anyone that's coming into our business or even in the Christian ministry to make sure that your words are choice, and make sure that they are very, very concise, and that they're wise and they're scripturally based. Another one that's one of my favorite proverbs is, the mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life.
Hmm.
And when people hear us speak, they need to be drawn to us and not repelled by us. When they hear choice morsels, they need to be able to, we need to keep them like a hook all the time. And they need to be waiting. What is she going to say? What is he going to say in this next phrase? Instead of, oh, will I ever get out of this meeting? So that's one of the things I want to share with people coming up in our business, is to really embrace discipline, embrace teaching, embrace being taught by someone that is wiser than you, so that you won't make the mistakes that some of us made early on. Then number two, don't talk so much. Just listen and learn. Then, and the third one is, a soft answer turns away wrath. When you can speak gently to someone, even if it's in correction, they'll listen to it a lot more than if you're screaming at them or trying to prove a point with the volume of your voice. That will never work for anyone. And
Hmm.
I've seen in our business how that type of approach is very contradictory to what we're trying to do, and that's to sell ideas. So you can't sell when you're screaming.
Hmm. It's a good word. It's a good word. Well, Rhoda Gonzales, I am so glad that you are on the way with Christ. And I'm glad that we got this time to talk with each other tonight.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much for asking me. And as we close, I'd like to share one of my another proverb that's really, really precious. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and your plans will succeed. It doesn't say your plans might succeed, but it says your plans will succeed. And there's many times when I've said, Lord, your word says, if I commit this project to you, you'll make it work. You'll make it succeed. And I've never, ever been disappointed, Mr. Eric. So I want to encourage whoever is listening that if they commit their walk with the Lord, whether it's their ambitions, their actions, their intentions, if it's committed to Christ and committed to his ultimate goal, and that is to give him the glory and to reach unsaved to Christ, then your plans will succeed.
That's a good word. Thank you.
I appreciate this time so much, Eric, and thank you for the opportunity to share my heart, but mostly to share what God has done through these Proverbs. And I want to encourage anybody that's in our business or in any other business that's in what people call secular business, that if you use the biblical principles, they apply in every place where you go, every platform, every office, every coffee shop. All those principles, they work everywhere you work.
Just because a person follows Jesus doesn't mean that person is perfect. Following Jesus is a lifetime of growing more like him. Likewise, while there are followers who are more mature than others, who have spent more time growing close to Jesus than other followers, there are no followers of Jesus who are better than others. If you aren't on the way with Jesus, we invite you to check out the Follow Jesus page on the Baptist Standard website at baptiststandard.com/Follow Jesus to learn more about becoming a follower of him. If you are on the way with Jesus, we hope that this podcast has encouraged you to grow more like him. I'm Eric Black, editor of the Baptist Standard, and I'm glad you've been with us today.